China is building permanent military bases along the border with India. China is deploying thousands of more troops. It is also building nuclear missile silos, infrastructure with power supply, roads and stations. China is also talking peace with India. At the same time, its president is talking about cracking skulls and spilling blood. So whom do you believe? The peaceniks or the warmongers? The ones who talk border disengagement or the ones who beef up border deployments? It's the same with Pakistan. Ceasefire with India and then back-to-back drone provocations. The latest one at the Indian High Commission in Islamabad. None of this is surprising. The message for India is clear, has been clear for a while now. These neighbors only understand the language of strength, so India should fortify its defenses and step up its tech and defense game. On Gravitas tonight, we'll discuss also on the show this Friday, Imran Khan's denial on Uyghurs breaks his own record. This time he says he believes China's version on Xinjiang and that there are far worse human rights violations in the world. The New York Times advertises for a job in India and ends up exposing its biases. It is looking for someone who will criticize the Modi government, and it is saying so in so many words. The Americans have left their biggest military base in Afghanistan, BAGRAM. We'll tell you what they've left behind. And tech giants are serious about the race to space. Now an 82-year-old woman has joined it. She'll fly with Jeff Bezos. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
Tokyo Olympics organizers have warned that they are prepared to hold the games behind closed doors as COVID-19 cases rise, leaving ticket holders in limbo just 3 weeks before the opening ceremony. A day after the ruling Chinese Communist Party's 100th anniversary celebrations, shares of many companies in the Chinese stock market hit a 3-month low. Investors dumped Chinese stocks following the People's Bank of China's net withdrawal of liquidity. Despite being one of the world's leaders in vaccinations, Israel has reported its highest daily infection rate in 3 months. 307 new cases, mostly linked to the Delta variant. Amid simmering tensions between Iran and the West, top diplomats have said Tehran has been restricting United Nations nuclear inspectors from getting access to its main uranium enrichment plant at Natanz. Sources say Iran has cited security concerns after what it says was an attack on the site in April. With the EU's passport scheme not recognizing the Indian version of the AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine, travel plans of up to 5 million Britons could be impacted. The UK is currently witnessing a rise in the Delta variant cases. EU has, as of now, approved 4 vaccines: Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson. Multinationals like Google and Facebook are likely to be taxed at a rate of at least 15%. After about 130 countries signed up for the Organization for Economic Development's global tax reform. Evacuations have been taking place as firefighters battled intense flames across parts of Northern California in the US and British Columbia in Canada, which have left several homes destroyed. A study by the University of Washington indicates that parts of the Arctic Ocean region, which are critical for the survival of polar bears, are seeing a dip in summer sea ice levels due to climate change. After 4 days of relentless upsets in the women's draw at Wimbledon, the remaining top seeds have sailed through to the last 16. Second seed Aryna Sabalenka dropped only 3 games in a 6-love, 6-3 win over Colombian qualifier Maria Camila Osorio Serrano. 7th seed Iga Świątek was even more dominant, beating Romanian Irina Camila Begu 6-1, 6-love. 8th seed Karolina Pliskova overcame compatriot Teresa Martinkova 6-3, 6-3. American sprinter Sha'Carri Richardson will miss the 100-meter event at the Tokyo Olympics despite topping the US trials. The 21-year-old tested positive for cannabis at the meet and has accepted a 1-month suspension, which is backdated to June 28th. All her results at the trials have been voided, but she can still be picked for the 4x100-meter relay team at the discretion of the US Olympic Committee.
In June last year, China provoked India. It attacked Indian soldiers in Galwan. 20 Indian soldiers were killed in action. China lost more men, but it never acknowledged their sacrifice. For the first time since the 1980s, blood was shed on the India-China border. Then China started talking about peace. But as always, its actions do not match its words. China is engaging in fresh provocations. More than a year after the clashes at Galwan, China is escalating the border standoff. Chinese troop deployments are now at their highest levels in decades. As China stonewalled India during talks, the P.L.A. sent more troops to the disputed border. It has deployed more advanced weapons. It has built structures that will serve as permanent bases for Chinese soldiers. Earlier this week, we told you how India is shifting its defense focus from Pakistan to China, how India is preparing to match the Chinese deployments at the border. Tonight, we'll tell you what's happening on the other side, on the Chinese side, how Beijing is escalating tensions at the border. Reports say that in the past few months, the People's Liberation Army has gradually increased its troop presence. Now there are 50,000 Chinese soldiers at the border. This is an increase of about 15,000 since last year. Back in July 2020, China had 35,000 odd soldiers at the border. Where are these soldiers? Mostly in eastern Ladakh. That's where a bulk of the build-up has taken place. This is also the region which was at the center of the recent standoff. Earlier, we reported how India is redeploying 50,000 more troops to the China front. Total number of Indian soldiers on the border, 200,000. They're spread out across the line of actual control. And sources tell us that China has about the same number of soldiers on the LAC. And this is only one part of India's challenge, the Chinese troops. The second part is their bases. The P.L.A. is building bases to station soldiers permanently. Reports say China has built hundreds of new structures to support troops. These are military encampments, a collection of huts and structures where troops can stay. Where is this happening? In two towns, Rudok, that is in Tibet's Ladakh frontier, and Kangsiwar, a deserted town in Aksai Chin. It sits between Tibet and the Xinjiang region. China is equipping these areas with modern facilities and military fortification. It is believed that the Chinese forces have dug underground bunkers and tunnels here. They have installed portable cabins and huts for troops, helipads and field hospitals, according to reports. They've also arranged power supply. Reports say China has built small hydroelectric power stations. They've also installed solar panels. At the camp in Rudok alone, we are told around 20 permanent and temporary structures have been erected. They can house 15 to 18,000 troops. So what is the message that China is trying to send here? Talks are only a formality, perhaps a time-buying tactic. In the meantime, a massive force is being readied at the border. What about disengagement and peace? Well, China says that's not a problem. It says military deployment should ease tensions, and it describes the border situation as, quote-unquote, generally stable. Listen to this.
The current situation on the border between China and India is generally stable, and the two sides are in negotiations to settle border issues. Against such a backdrop, the words and deeds of major military and political officials and military deployments should help ease the situation and create mutual trust between the two sides, not the other way around.
Yes, words and deeds of political and military officials should ease the situation, not escalate it. China should take its own advice because its actions on the border with India can hardly be called peaceful. Recently, China also deployed surface-to-air missiles near the Indian territory of Ladakh. This includes the HQ-9 missile system. It's a Chinese copy of the Russian-made S-400 missiles. Chinese troops have not marched to the LAC empty-handed. They're armed with advanced weaponry. What about India? India is responding to Chinese aggression, building infrastructure at the border, including the construction of insulated cabins and huts on the front. This is where troops can stay during the harsh winters. India is also focusing on connectivity to mobilize faster in the event of an escalation. Reports say new tunnels and roads are being carved out. Recently, India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh inaugurated 63 bridges during a visit to Ladakh. These bridges are spread out across the entire line of actual control. India must ready itself because it shares a long border with China. But the rest of the world should also pay attention. Just because some countries do not share a border with China does not mean they're safe from Chinese aggression. Beijing, we can tell you, is ramping up its weapons development program. It is seeking capabilities to hit targets around the world with nuclear missiles. Look at this. These are satellite images from a desert in Yumen in China. Reports say China is building more than 100 missile silos here. It is bolstering its nuclear power. It has been building these silos for the past 6 months. Reports say they could be used to house the Chinese DF-41 intercontinental ballistic missiles. Experts believe that these missiles can be equipped with 10 nuclear warheads that can be mapped to hit different targets. Each missile is believed to have a range of 12 to 15,000 kilometers. With capabilities like these, China is arming itself to strike as far as the United States. It could hit the US within 30 minutes. No wonder Washington has taken note. They call China's actions, quote-unquote, concerning.
I think what is fair to say is that these reports and other developments suggest that the PRC's nuclear arsenal will grow more quickly and to a higher level than perhaps previously anticipated. This buildup, it is concerning. It raises questions about the PRC's intent. And for us, it reinforces the importance of pursuing practical measures to reduce nuclear risks. Despite what appears to be PRC obfuscation, this rapid buildup has become more difficult to hide, and it highlights how the PRC appears, again, to be deviating from decades of nuclear strategy based around minimum deterrence.
Whether it's the border with India or the nuclear buildup, China's actions do not inspire confidence. And they're not even mincing their words. Yesterday, Xi Jinping promised to crack the skulls of his rivals, exact words spoken. If this doesn't ring alarm bells, nothing will. China's rise is the opposite of peaceful. And that brings us to Pakistan. It is trying to disrupt peace in Kashmir yet again, this time not through ceasefire violations or infiltrations, but with a new tool, drones. On Sunday, 2 drones attacked an Indian Air Force base in Jammu. On Wednesday, 3 more drones were spotted along the border, and this afternoon a drone was seen hovering above the Indian High Commission in Islamabad. What is Pakistan up to? Are these drone attacks and sightings a warning of things to come? Is Pakistan using them to open a new front? And if yes, how should India respond? Here's a report.
The 27th of June, Sunday. The Indian Air Force station in Jammu is rocked by 2 explosions within a gap of 5 minutes. Behind the blast were 2 explosive-laden unmanned aerial vehicles. Evidence suggests that these killer machines could belong to the Lashkar-e-Taiba. On Wednesday, 3 more drones were spotted in Jammu's Kaluchak area. And the third provocation came on Friday afternoon. This time on the other side of the border. A drone was spotted hovering over the Indian High Commission complex in Islamabad. It was seen at a time when an event was being held at the mission. The Indian mission is located within a fortified diplomatic enclave in the Pakistani capital. A residential complex for staffers is located at a short distance from the mission. Not only is the appearance of a drone here a security scare, but a complete violation of diplomatic norms. And it begs the question, what is Pakistan up to? Is it trying to open a new front in Kashmir? We say this because this is a completely new form of escalation. Yes, since the ceasefire agreement reached in February this year, there have been no significant violations. But 3 back-to-back provocations, all involving drones, cannot be a mere coincidence. Pakistan may maintain deniability. The drones are low-flying. They escape detection by radars or interjection by air defense systems. But if India manages to trace them back to Pakistan, then all bets are off. The drones pose a lethal threat to Indian forward bases along the border. They could also intercept Indian communication at the Islamabad mission. They also reveal some gaps in India's capabilities. As of now, India has no clear tactics to prevent these potentially deadly drone attacks. India primarily relies on using arms to shoot down the drones. What it needs is to invest in security measures that are in sync with the proliferation of new technologies. Here are 2 of them. 1. The installation of GPS jammers at all sensitive installations could make the drones fly off their path. And 2. India must invest in developing a command center, like Israel's Iron Dome, to neutralize any future drone attacks. Today, the situation in the valley is largely peaceful. But going by these developments, it is absolutely clear that non-state actors in tandem with the Pakistani establishment are looking for new ways to create chaos. To counter these sinister plans, India must let go of the traditional methods and devise new strategies rooted in technology. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
And we're not done with Pakistan. Imran Khan's hypocrisy has landed him back in the headlines. He accuses the West of Islamophobia. He accuses France of clamping down on Islam. He accuses India of alienating Kashmiris. He even takes on Saudi Arabia once in a while, accusing it of ignoring the plight of Muslims. But, in his own words, Imran Khan frankly doesn't know much about what's happening in Xinjiang. He doesn't have enough knowledge, doesn't know the exact situation, and would never talk about it in public. Why? Because the Chinese are sensitive people. These are all of his previous statements, his words, poor attempts at denial of Xinjiang's reality. And now the Pakistani Prime Minister has come up with the mother of all denials. He says that he believes in the Chinese version of the Xinjiang story. The remarks are hardly surprising, frankly. When you're buried neck deep in debt, you'd frankly believe everything that your lender tells you. Listen to this.
Our interaction with the Chinese officials, that version of what is happening in Xinjiang is completely different to the version of what we hear from the Western media and the Western governments. So, because we have a very strong relationship with China, and because we have a relationship based on trust, so we actually accept the Chinese version. You know, what they say about their programs in Xinjiang, so we accept it.
Did you notice the pronunciation? He says Xinjiang. That's what the Uyghurs called the region before the Communist Party took control and gave it a Chinese name, Xinjiang. Before the Uyghurs were forced to act, live and dress Chinese. Anyway, geography and history are not Imran Khan's forte. He thinks Germany and Japan share borders. Xinjiang must have surely been a mistake. Here's another one. The Pakistani Prime Minister said that he believes what China says about its programs in Xinjiang. And then he goes on to say that there are far worse human rights violations that get no attention. So he's unwittingly acknowledging that the Chinese are indeed committing atrocities on Uyghurs. Watch this.
The second point is that we find it a little bit hypocritical when there are much worse human rights issues in the world which get no attention. The second point is that we find it a little bit hypocritical when there are much worse human rights issues in the world which get no attention.
Worse human rights violations, no comparisons can be drawn, but we really can't think of any worse human rights violations than China's cultural and religious genocide of Uyghur Muslims. Almost 2 million of them are in jail. The rest are forced to attend re-education camps. They're released only when they succumb to Chinese beliefs and practices. Uyghur women are subjected to forced sterilization, abortion, and state-sanctioned rape. Uyghur mosques are razed down to build toilets. Uyghur refugees are charged with treason and killed. And this is not the Western version of what's happening in Xinjiang. These are stories told by Uyghur Muslims themselves. But for Imran Khan, these Muslims do not count when he talks about growing Islamophobia or the growing crimes against Muslims the world over. Because the idea of Muslim solidarity is just a political tool for him. So he uses it when it suits him. What do recruiters look for when hiring a candidate for any position? Qualification, experience, perhaps a good reference. This is the norm. And then there is the New York Times, the newspaper that claims to seek the truth. It says so on their website. Right now they're seeking a correspondent in India. What is anti-establishment, anti-Modi? And this is not our interpretation. The New York Times spells this out in as many words. Let me read out the job description for you. Mr. Modi is advocating a self-sufficient muscular nationalism centered on the country's Hindu majority. That vision puts him at odds with the interfaith, multicultural goals of modern India's founders. And just in case you're wondering, I'm reading from the so-called job description of the New York Times. It's not an opinion piece, although it sounds like one. These scathing lines are designed to attract a candidate who will fill the role of a business correspondent for the New York Times, not an opinion writer, mind you, a correspondent. Slight problem. Reporting requires objectivity. What the NYT is looking for is a candidate who looks at every story through a prism of prejudice. The job description says, and I'm quoting again, under Narendra Modi, its charismatic Prime Minister, India has moved to rival China's economic and political heft in Asia, drama playing out along their tense border and within national capitals across the region. What kind of recruitment ad is this? When was the last time you saw a recruitment ad like this? At least I have never seen something like this. This edit P/job ad was posted 4 days ago. But the NYT's anti-India bias is much older. I'll give you a sample. In March 2019, the New York Times wrote, after India loses dogfight to Pakistan, question arises about its vintage military. Absolute fiction. The fact is, India never lost a dogfight to its western neighbor. The publication talks about India's MiG-21 Bison being hit. It conveniently leaves out the fact that a Pakistani F-16 was also shot down. In March this year, a headline in the New York Times declared that India's system is broken. In May, it said India's outbreak is a danger to the world. The danger is the virus from China and its Delta variant that caused so much suffering in India. But the New York Times likes to spin stories to suit its narrative. It misses no opportunity to paint India in a bad light. In the NYT's reportage, India is defined by rapes and murders. In the NYT's India, death is the only truth. Pretty grim, isn't it? Also, pretty obviously biased. Remember a cartoon, this one, mocking India's space program. This was the New York Times' masterpiece. Clearly, they have some serious issues with India. And fair enough, every publication is entitled to its biases and opinions. But then, they should not claim to be the flag bearer of unbiased journalism. The New York Times cannot claim to seek the truth and help people understand the world while planting biased reporters in the world's biggest democracy and also writing op-eds on India's supposedly battered free press. It does not work that way, at least not in India. It may work in China. Of all the publications, the NYT should know this. It reportedly received $50,000 from China's state propaganda outlet, the China Daily, in the last 4 years. $50,000. I'm not making this up. I'm citing documents filed by China Daily with the US Justice Department. Take a look. What was this money for? Well, who knows? Perhaps pushing a certain narrative. The NYT seems to be at it even in its job ads. Well, I don't know about applicants, but the ad surely has not earned it any new readers. Over the last year, in fact, the NYT's murky journalism has also cost the paper some high-profile talent. In June last year, the NYT deplatformed its own editorial page editor, James Bennett. He met with protests inside his own newsroom for publishing an op-ed by a Republican senator. A month later, the NYT's editor and writer, Bari Weiss, resigned. She said that she was bullied and called a Nazi for her conservative views. In a resignation letter to the publisher, this is what she wrote. A new consensus has emerged in the press, but perhaps, especially at this paper, that truth isn't a process of collective discovery, but an orthodoxy already known to an enlightened few whose job is to inform everyone else. If a person's ideology is in keeping with the new orthodoxy, they and their work remain unscrutinized. Well, when you learn about its record, the job description barely comes as a surprise. As we speak, the New York Times is being slammed in India for its prejudice, bias, cancel culture and Hindu phobia. We also spoke to some of our viewers and experts from around the world, commentators, thought leaders. Listen into what they had to say.
The New York Times is transmitting to everyone that it's interested in a certain type of candidate with certain political views.
I think the New York Times has got all the sort of, obsessions about the initial guilt, either by race or by nation or by history. And they say that they're very much decolonialists. But if you think they are Americans lecturing the rest of the world according to American ideas, and I think that's colonialism.
I think it's unfortunate that the Times has really transitioned from having, a traditional liberal bias, which is not unusual in the media, of course, in the mainstream and corporate media in the U.S., but they've really transitioned from a liberal bias to taking on a really activist role.
If this is actually meant to be true, the New York Times should be ashamed of itself. And I think quite a lot of Indians in America would be quite justified to go and take them to the court, because it's a gross violation of human rights.
To specifically make it as a prerequisite that a professional journalist must have to be with certain ideology, that too for a news daily like New York Times, is something shows that they don't want the alternate views to be published in their organization.
You see, a publication does not need a correspondent on ground to churn out biased stories on India. They can be written from New York too, or from the Bahamas. So before bringing a reporter from New Delhi into its paybook, the NYT may want to bring some diversity, some objectivity, a slice of truth in its pages. Because while India's future may not be at a crossroads, the future of journalism surely is, and the New York Times is not helping with this stinker of a job ad. The big events of the world are well documented, whether it is the Battle of Stalingrad, the Great Escape at Dunkirk, or the disaster at Gallipoli. Most of them rave about brave soldiers and astute strategists, but missing from most of these accounts of war are women. The world wars turned their lives upside down. Some were shipped off as nurses to battlefields. Others became commodities for enemy states. One group in South Korea encapsulates their pain and suffering: the comfort women. Young Korean girls who were smuggled to Japan for prostitution. 80 years on, only a handful of them are alive. But they're still fighting for justice. It's a fight that is at risk of being forgotten.
They were treated like cattle in World War II, stolen from their homes, forced into brothels in an alien land. More than 80 years later, they are fighting disease and disillusionment. The world recognizes their plight. but justice still eludes them. Historians say 200,000 Korean girls and women were smuggled during World War II, sometimes with the promise of jobs, sometimes to pay off a relative's debt. Once in Japan, they became comfort women. Translation of the Japanese word, ianthu, a euphemism for prostitutes. There are 240 registered survivors from Japan's wartime brothels. Only 14 are still alive. Among them is Leok-san. The Japanese came for her when she was 16. Since then, she has only known a life of pain and trauma. At 91, her only dream is a day of peace.
I just wish I could live at peace for one single day.
This is where Lee and other comfort women live today, the House of Sharing. Its manager fears people will soon forget about these elderly survivors, that with their death, the legal cases will also disappear.
Most of the grandmothers were born in the 1920s and just over a dozen remain nationwide. I'm afraid such accounts will vanish in the mists of history when the remaining ones pass away.
In 2015, Japan apologized for the way comfort women were treated. They also established a $9 million fund to help the survivors. But 3 years later, Seoul shut down the fund. They said some survivors were overlooked. Since then, the matter has been in court. Back in January, there was some good news. The South Korean court ordered the seizure of Japanese government assets. This would pay for Japan's wartime damages. But last week, another court quashed this ruling. Like most colonial powers, Japan got a pass. Tokyo says all colonial claims and damages have been settled. New claims, they say, will damage bilateral relations. But these survivors are not easily deterred. They plan to fight till the end.
I'm determined to not die before I resolve this. I need to be alive as much as 200 years to resolve this.
The years of abuse and exploitation have not broken their spirit. They have the evidence. They also have truth in their corner. What they don't have is time. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
They say invading Afghanistan is easy. The British have done it, so have the Soviets and the Americans. But getting out, well, that's the tough part. Afghan withdrawals are always violent and bloody. So America has gone a different route. They're making a dash for it. Overnight, the US abandoned their biggest military base in Afghanistan, BAGRAM. For 20 years, it was the seat of American power in Afghanistan when US presidents wanted to feel like commanders-in-chief. This is where they came. Bagram has a special place in American history, but the troop pullout was anything but special. Local officials say that they were not even informed. The Americans picked up their bags, called it a night, and left unannounced.
According to the information that we have, American forces left Bagram Air Base last night without any coordination with District Administrative Office, the Governor's Office, and other relevant administrations. This has not been officially coordinated and reported to us. But from the ground, we get this information from the situation in the area.
So who's in charge now? Bagram has been turned over to the Afghan military. This was the scene today morning. No American or NATO troops at the gate. Instead, there were Afghan soldiers. Now, this is a huge moment in this war because Afghanistan's history runs parallel to Bagram's. In the 1980s, it was used by the Soviet troops. In the late 1990s, it was contested by the Taliban and the Northern Alliance. And in 2001, the NATO took over Bagram. What they found was a rundown compound destroyed by rocket attacks. Today, it is a sprawling mini-city. Bagram is spread over 70 square kilometers. Inside, there are 2 airstrips, 3 large hangars, a 50-bed hospital, gyms, restaurants, grocery stores. It's basically a township, the jewel of Afghan military power. The question is, what happens to this jewel now? The Taliban will definitely be eyeing it. Capturing Bagram would be a win on 2 counts. 1, the symbolism of taking over a former American base. And 2, the strategic value of Bagram. It is a fortress just 40 kilometers north of Kabul. So chances are the Taliban will be drawing up plans. And the Americans seem to have foreseen this. In the last few weeks, they have been cleaning up the base. Some equipment was handed over to the Afghans. Some were taken back to America, and anything that was not on the plane was trashed. Why? So that it doesn't fall into the hands of the Taliban. And looking at where things are going, it was a good call. This last month, the month of June, was the deadliest in 2 decades. That they have killed 6,000 Taliban terrorists. And this is all in 1 month. What about the other side? Reports show 638 servicemen and civilians were killed, plus 1,060 wounded. Looking at these numbers, you have to wonder, is this a looming civil war? Or has it already started? Because on the ground, a battle is underway. And that's because the Taliban has not changed. They don't care about democracy or peace. They want power. And if they return to Kabul, it will be a repeat of 1996. Make no mistake, there is evidence for what I'm saying. Activists in northeast Afghanistan are reporting worrying news. They say the Taliban is imposing new laws. Men are being asked to grow beards. Women are not being allowed to leave their house unaccompanied. Dowry rules have been set for marriage. And they're insisting on trial without evidence. In fairness, these are not new rules. These are old ones, the same rules that the Taliban imposed the last time. For now, they're limited to certain pockets. But what if the Taliban overruns provinces? What if it reaches Kabul? All the gains made in the last 2 decades could be lost. And that's what 20 years of Western occupation has given Afghanistan. Their presence made the country relatively safe and free, and now their rushed exit is set to reverse all of that. Somewhere along the line, the coalition lost its way. Let me tell you a story from December 2001. America flew in New York City firefighters and cops to the BAGRAM airbase. It was a symbolic mission. They buried a piece of the World Trade Center below the Bagram airstrip. That was America's mission in Afghanistan, to find Osama bin Laden and to root out terrorism. 20 years later, they're leaving those same terrorists in charge. Their military campaign was a failure, and America tried to hide this failure by piling more troops. At its peak, you must listen to this, Bagram hosted 100,000 American soldiers. It featured in pop culture, in books and Hollywood movies. All that posturing and bravado only to flee in the middle of the night. Turkey's president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, is a man obsessed with history. He lives in the glory days of the Ottoman Empire. His biggest rival is a man from the past, the first Turkish president, Kemal Atatürk. Erdogan's fascination with the past does not end with him. He's dragging his country along to a backward and conservative past. Why are we talking about this now? Because Erdogan has pulled Turkey out of a landmark treaty. Ironically enough, it is called the Istanbul Convention. What does it talk about? 3 specific things: ending domestic violence and violence against women, protecting survivors, and punishing perpetrators. Basically, it is a broad treaty that protects women from abuse. Turkey was actually the first country to sign it in the year 2012. 34 others followed. So why is Erdogan walking away from a deal that his own country pioneered? Officially, there's no explanation. The Turkish government issued a gazette after withdrawing from this convention. It does not say why Turkey is pulling out. But reports from Erdogan's inner circle reveal a worrying trend. They say the Istanbul Convention is eroding conservative values. It is promoting divorce and recognizing homosexuality. Some say it is a threat to the traditional family culture. But which part of a traditional family involves domestic violence? Which part of a traditional family promotes homophobia? And if they do, maybe it's time to rethink the idea of a traditional family. How are women in Turkey reacting to this move? One word: enraged. There are massive protests in major cities. Thousands of men and women are marching through the streets. Here's what some of them had to say.
I'm sure women are exposed to violence, rape and abuse elsewhere in the world. But in the end, they know that those people will be punished. there will be a deterrent punishment and the state will protect them. But I cannot say this. There is nobody to protect me, and this is really awful.
Honestly, I feel outraged about this. I feel really offended. This convention was not hijacked by LGBTI+ and women. This is our convention. This convention is there to protect us.
These are genuine concerns. Do you know how the government responded? With tear gas and batons, riot cops pushed back against the protesters. They were driven away using force. Frankly, there's nothing surprising in this. Erdogan does not tolerate dissent, especially when his own pet project is at stake. The Turkish president invested a lot into this decision. It's a desperate bid to retain his conservative support base. And for that, Erdogan will sacrifice anything, including the safety of 40 million women living in Turkey. For him, treaties and conventions are dispensable. He says Turkey's fight for women did not start with the Istanbul Convention.
Some groups are trying to present our official withdrawal from the Istanbul Convention on July 1st as going backwards. Just like our fight against violence towards women did not start with the Istanbul Convention, it won't end with our withdrawal.
Bizim kadına yönelik şiddetle mücadelemiz.
Which group is Erdogan talking about? The LGBTQ community. This is actually an interesting paradox. Homosexuality has been legal since the Ottoman Empire. But being gay in Erdogan's Turkey today is dangerous. The president's spokesman says the LGBTQ movement is, quote-unquote, incompatible with Turkish society. He's rubbishing his own country's laws. So here's a question for the president of Turkey. If conventions don't matter, if laws do not matter, then what should citizens fall back on? You see, such treaties are signed for a reason, to create a common response to a common problem. Pulling out from such a treaty is indeed a step back, no matter how much Erdogan tries to spin it. And then there's the timing of the decision. It is an affront in itself. 2020 was a year of lockdowns. Women were stuck at home with their tormentors, and the result was tragic. 300 women killed in Turkey last year. 189 killed so far in this year. At a time when laws should be strengthened, Erdogan is repealing them. Well, this is what happens with delusional leadership, when obsessions of grandeur replace progress and freedoms. Reminds me of Mehmed the Conqueror, the young Ottoman emperor who ended the Byzantine Empire. Like Erdogan, Mehmed too was ambitious and ruthless. But he died a tyrant, feared by the people he ruled. Well, that's the part of Ottoman history Erdogan chooses to ignore. From the past, let's take a step into the future. In his bid to win the modern-day space race, billionaire Jeff Bezos has recruited, would you believe it, an 82-year-old astronaut. In a few weeks from now, Wally Funk will realize her 6-decade-old dream. She will fly with Bezos to space. This flight was seen as the first ever attempt at space tourism. But another billionaire wants to beat Bezos to the finish line. Our next report tells you more.
In the 1960s, Wally Funk saw a dream. She wanted to go to space. Funk came close to realizing her dream, but not close enough. Even after completing her astronaut training, Funk was excluded from space missions because of her gender. 6 decades later, at the age of 82, Wally Funk is finally realizing her dream. On the 20th of July, she will become the oldest woman to fly to space. Billionaire Jeff Bezos will be accompanying her.
You're in zero gravity for 4 minutes. You come back down. We land gently on the desert surface. We open the hatch and you step outside. What's the first thing you say?
I will say, honey, that was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Funk will fly on the New Shepard, a rocket built by Blue Origin, the space company of Jeff Bezos. In a couple of weeks, Bezos will hop on the same rocket with his brother, Wally Funk, and another guest to travel to the edge of space. The entire flight will be 10 minutes long with a few minutes of weightlessness. If successful, this will be a once-in-a-lifetime experience for Bezos and his guests. The question is, why is he doing it? Why does Bezos want to become the first man to fly in his own rocket to space? Beyond the global attention that his space company will get, Bezos wants to be the first to kickstart commercial space travel. But another billionaire is chasing the dream of space tourism. Richard Branson could beat Jeff Bezos. He has booked a flight to space through his own space company, Virgin Galactic. Branson is expected to fly on 11th July, 9 days before Bezos.
And when we return, I will announce something very exciting to give more people the chance to become astronauts.
Beyond the obvious bragging rights, there is a lot more at stake for both businessmen. Both companies, Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic, want to offer the wealthy a trip to space just like the one they are taking. No one knows yet how they will do it, but the customers are already lining up. An anonymous bidder is said to have grabbed a ticket from Blue Origin at a price of $28 million. He or she will join Jeff Bezos on his flight. Virgin Galactic already has a list of 600 customers. They have paid up to $250,000 each for a chance to fly to space when the company starts commercial operations. But at these prices, it seems like only billionaires will be welcomed on board. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
It's Friday. What are your plans for the weekend, if I may ask? Do you plan to go out and grab a bite with your friends and loved ones? Well, don't be surprised if your favorite fast food outlet fails to serve you iced tea, chicken wings or hot dogs. Global fast food chains, you see, are running out of key ingredients and products. Does it have to do with people overeating after the lockdown, or is there another story at play? Our next report tells you.
Did you crave for some fry in the months go by? When you were locked indoors and your wings were clipped, did you wonder what it would be like to be sitting outside with a plate of wings? Now the day has come when you can be out in the sun, sipping a glass of tea. And a friend with it to toast. But there is no tea in your favorite eatery. And also no beef roast. Poetry over. Time for bad news. The world's leading fast food stores are running out of key ingredients and products. In the United States, it's iced tea. In South Korea, it's fries. If you happen to be in Seoul and you want French fries, cheese sticks is all that the country's top fast food chain will offer you. Halfway around the world, Starbucks in America are short of iced green tea. Cinnamon dolce syrup, spinach, feta and egg white wraps. Quick question, are humans, fresh out of the lockdown, eating too much? Making up for all the lost calories? Not really. Supply bottlenecks is the problem here. Restaurants have reopened and demands for fast food ingredients have suddenly shot up. But their supply is slow. In fact, the whole supply chain has been disrupted. There is shortage of labor in factories, warehouses and farms. As a result, production has been hit. Cargo movement too has become slow. Lockdowns and pandemic-related inspections have slowed down ships. French fry shipments, for example, have not been able to make it to burger and fried chicken outlets because of dearth of shipping containers. A Wendy's in the United States has received just half of the lettuce it ordered. Some Subways in New York do not have roast beef, rotisserie chicken, or ketchup, even spicy mustard. Imagine subs without mustard. Some restaurants in the United States are out of chicken wings, hot dogs, and Canadian bacon. American diners are out of wieners. KFCs are running out of key items, oil, packets, paper bags. Will India too feel the pinch once it reopens completely? According to a Reuters survey, at least 9 major global fast food chains have already been hit by shortages. When will this end? Some say not before the summer of 2022. Bureau Report, WION. World is One.
With that, it's a wrap. We're leaving you with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching.